the 1 hour mark if we have extended questions, but the content will not exceed 1 hour. We will be recording this webinar for playback in the future. We will send an email to all participants within the next 24 to 48 hours with access information to this recording. We have muted all participants, so we cannot hear you, but you can hear us, so please send in your questions through the GoToWebinar software. We will be telling the questions and answer when time allows, and if we have not answered, we will get them at the end, so please be sure to enter those. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Rick Haynes. Rick is a 19-year Lean and Six Sigma practitioner, one of Smarter Solutions' senior instructors. Through his career, he is certified as a Master Black Belt Champion, and a Yellow Belt, along with teaching and certifying professionals in all the Lean Six Sigma areas. His personal Lean Six Sigma work has spanned nearly all business types, manufacturing, transactional, along with research and development business. He's a master degreed statistician and has taught statistics in the Penn State University system. He has worked in all levels of the business, from the entry level up to a site engineering manager. His life experiences and skills will provide you with great insight on today's topic for the SIPOC and value stream map. I will now turn it over to Rick, and we will get started.
Hi there, Rick Haynes here. Sorry about the little break there. So I was getting all the stuff for me. Again, I work for Smarter Solutions. They're the sponsor of this webinar. It's a consulting firm, been around for 15, 16 years now. Forrest Breifogel is the CEO and the owner and the starter of it. It does consulting at the business level and teaches Lean Six Sigma stuff. I am one of the lead instructors. And this webinar came out of, like most of mine I get to give in the technical sense, came from questions students have had. And that's why we're talking about this. This is a continuing education technique or topic at some level. We're going to ask a couple questions during it because I'd like to know what the audience is as I decide what to talk about. And again, the first question is, why are you here? Well, we've got a couple choices here. Please pick one that's the primary choice. You could just be interested in these lean topics, just trying to keep up, try advanced skills, or just looking for new ideas. So please select one. Appreciate you participating. I'm watching. Looks like we've got the first and the last one are doing well. I don't know. It's a race till the end. What are we coming? And again, Mallory, who introduced me, will be taking your questions. She'll share them with me and interrupt as they come up. So I really would rather not do the questions all at the end. I'd rather you pop them up when you're ready, and we'll cover them in a point here. Now, you should be, if you finish up your vote now, we're going to go post the answers. And you should see now what we have. It looks like, boy, we're right there pretty close, looking for basic enterprise improvement ideas and just generally interested. Well, that's great. I do admit that those four choices aren't that much different. So you're all here to learn something and looking for ideas, and I appreciate that. All right? Here's where we're going. We're going to talk a quick history of the SIPOC, a little bit about value stream maps, talk about why I chose this subject, and then we'll do an example. And the example is actually the funnest part. Now here's what was not in the advertisement. We're going to do an example of making an apple pie. Hopefully you've all eaten one before, but maybe not made one. I actually last night made an apple pie, took value stream map and SIPOC information on it, and I'm going to share that with you, and we're going to go through the process to show it goes together. I wanted to avoid the normal pizza shop that everybody seems to use in these. And I guess this is a manufacturing type example, but you get to eat it when you're done. So that's where we're going. The reference, if you wanted a reference to the stuff we're talking to, it really comes out of Forrest Breifogel's Volume 3 book on his new series, which is really about doing improvement projects. in our system here at Smarter Solutions, we're probably at the newest generation of the Lean Six Sigma genre that's out there, and we're not the only ones, but we're there, is that we really teach business process improvement without a Six Sigma spin and a Lean spin. When I started all this back in, again, I think Mallory introduced me with 19 years, but I wrote that last year. I can say it's 20 years now, since 2010. I was certified in, well, a long time ago, but it was a year ending in 01. People taught Lean and people taught Six Sigma, and I've been through both training courses as independent things. My last company, we said, well, you know, neither one is perfect. Let's join them. And even at Quality Progress, at 8-9 years ago, told you do the early steps, decide if it's a Lean or a Six Sigma process, then follow that plan. Well, the leading people now have blended them together to a Lean and a Six Sigma together. I believe it's optimal. Our path through it is slightly different from some of the other leading groups, but they're all quite good. But the goal is every project isn't just Lean or Six Sigma. It is a mixture of both of them. And our system, people who like Six Sigma immensely don't think we cover enough of the Six Sigma stuff. Those that are Lean acolytes, they don't think we cover Lean enough. But I'll tell you, every system's good and everyone's got benefits. We teach a mix of them. This is to supplement some of the stuff to talk about value stream mapping. Now, Lean people love value stream maps. It is the vehicle that you basically run your whole project through. I find Six Sigma people don't like value stream maps because it's a Lean tool, and there's this little bit of competition. But in our method, you use it when it's the right tool. Now, what I have here is the process. We have a lover of flowcharts in our company. We've got a flow chart that's 96 inches long and 3 foot wide. It's our whole improvement process. This is one piece of it for the define phase of the process. Where we're going to be in this is you create an initial SIPOC as you define a project as a scoping tool. So we're going to talk about that. But sometimes we don't realize that this is a starting block for a value stream map. But what is the SIPOC? Well, did it come from Six Sigma? And I decided to hit the books, which now means Google it, about where SIPOCs come from. Best I can find is the term SIPOC seemed to develop somewhere around the start of Six Sigma stuff. It was probably the consultants trying to change an old tool and make it new. But the earliest references I can find come from an IPO model, which is really what programmers have always used. Inputs to a process provide an output. But there's notes back in the 70s when IBM introduced and trademarked something called HIPO, which was a hierarchical input-output model they used in some of their programming big processes. So this tool really was before the 70s. Six Sigma came into adoption in the late 80s when it was first came up. I got my experience starting in the late 80s, certified in 91, but it became popular then. It is considered a team-based product or process. It is not something you do sitting at your desk. I think there's an advantage in looking at your inputs and outputs in your process as a black box, but again, it's a great place to take your team through it to go so you all are at the same place. Where is my process going? What is my scope? And I teach this as a scoping tool as much as the kickoff of your project. Here's what it generally looks like. It's suppliers provide inputs to a process, which has outputs to a customer. Generally, we tell people the process should be 4 to 7 steps. Well, 4 to 7 is also a good start for how much detail you want in a value stream map. So that's one reason we're going there. General guidelines. Suppliers and inputs don't need to line up in rows, which is a common thing you can do starting out, that this supplier gives me this input, this supplier gives me this input. Well, generally, if you're doing that, you're probably too detailed. Suppliers should be general. Input should be general. Same as outputs and customers. Now, one of the other teachers of the company gave me the next steps, and I liked it. Inputs and outputs should be nouns. Process steps should be verbs. This thought keeps you clean about what goes in what column. Generally, when you're running an improvement project, the scope of the project is I'm going to investigate and improve all of the process steps and work on the quality of the input. That is the scope of the project. Now, outputs from intermediate steps of those 5 to 7 blocks, which are inputs for the next step, generally are never listed as inputs or outputs at this level of detail. Consider you're drawing a circle around your process, and your inputs are what's going into the circle, and your outputs are what's leaving. Don't discuss much of what's going on in the middle for a SIPOC. Now, common errors. Not making the supplier and customer list general. If you start listing every product and every customer, it overwhelms the value of the project. Don't align inputs and suppliers or outputs and customers, and don't list intermediate process inputs and outputs. And what's the other error? Well, not using it. Many people think it's trivial, but I found that it is a great, solid starting place for all projects, even if it's a lean-ish type project to sit down and do this. It also is discussion with your sponsor, champion, and team about where are we. I'm teaching a black belt class right now, and 4 folks from one company, so they've got a consistent environment behind them. One of them ended up adjusting a project based just on the SIPOC because the sponsor wanted something considered that they, in the process improvement, that they were going to consider just an input. And this is what you do. You have to make sure everybody understands what's in and what's out. One on shipping, when they wrote it out, they realized they were missing a middle process. They were talking about reducing damage during shipping. So it is a really great tool, and I think everybody should use it. Now, got a question come in. It says, where do you begin to map a business business value stream map when it doesn't, and it's all SOPs? Not sure how to answer that. I guess those are the words that were put in. If you can type in a little bit more, where do you begin? I'll talk about VSMs in the next little section if we can wait. If I'm not covering it, bring it back up again. But I'm just going to talk SIPOCs now and value stream maps second. Now, what should be an input? This is frequently asked questions. I do teach this stuff, but I talk about these topics every month. Generally, the only inputs you should consider are the ones you'd find like on a bill of materials for a part, or inputs that are transformed or consumed in the process. Generally, you don't list inputs as the equipment I use in the process or even the workers, because they really are not consumed, hopefully. But you're looking for the things that if I'm going to do another unit or another transaction, these are the stuff that I have to bring into my process. We generally talk about the facilities, the workforce, as just part of the process. Now, there are cases where you have a skilled worker, and I had a student from a facility in the Phoenix area. They had very specialized operators that came in and do one part of the process, then left, and they actually had to schedule those people to make sure they'd be there when they needed it. In that case, the worker really is an input because I can't run unless that person is available and they're released at the end to go do something else. In that case, the worker becomes an input and an output, that they're being used and released to other stuff at the end. But generally, you don't include those in there. Now I have a better understanding of the VSM question. Mallory said that the person put that in there, and they really want to know when there is not an SOP, and I will cover some of that when I get to value stream mapping. Another neat variant of the SIPOC, and you probably saw this in your training if you've been through it, is when you do your process map, you can actually look at inputs and outputs to every step. Again, that's the IPO model, but it does talk, you can see neat things that an output of one step becomes an input at 4 other steps. You might make sure that it's documented right and provided easily when you get there. Sometimes you can use this to understand where your critical customer metrics or characteristics, CTQs, you might call them, are generated in your process. That could be output 3 in this diagram. So if I'm having problems there, it drives me to look at all steps prior to that step. Also, I don't know what to call it, but there's a lot of variants to it. I'll call it SIPOC Plus. Some people add an extra column to the right that's called the critical to quality metrics. They write down a list of the characteristics that you have to meet during the process. I've seen one put out there that lists the regulatory or documents that drive the process, procedures, and its quality requirements. And many people have added to it, and I'll tell you, the right thing to do is add what you need to make your point. As a project leader, you put what you need. Next question here comes about, I'd like to get a feeling for how you use the SIPOC. And again, if I didn't say it, that stands for supplier and inputs and process as outputs to a customer. Those are the initials. But 5 choices, never heard of it. I've used it some, about half the time, nearly all. And then the last one is, not only do I use it on projects, but I use it on a lot of other stuff too. So thank you for answering. We'll give you a minute or so, but hopefully using it on almost all projects for those that do projects is a common event. We'll see how we're doing. It's up there, and some people use it sometimes. If you mark it off, I'll give you another 3-4 seconds here, and we'll keep moving. All right, now if you can close it off and post it so we can see what everybody said. It looks like the winner is use it all the time. Now, thank you for making me feel good on that one. Next choice is I use it every now and then. For those that use it, I'd recommend considering using it more often, but again, that's your choice. There are other tools that you can use in place of it, but I like that one. Hopefully, if you're using it sometime, you've got something in place of it to help as a scoping document, and somebody's never heard of it. Well, that's great. Everybody gets to learn something, so I appreciate that. And a couple use it all the time. Thank you for that. Back to the presentation, we're going to talk about value stream maps now. Value stream maps, again, it's the core tool for the lean-ish type projects, or if you went to a pure lean course from one of the lean consultants, this is something that you really start your whole project through your value stream map, and you document things you do in it. You make it more than one time. What's neat, it yields a system perspective. It really is a high-level enterprise-like tool. What's neat that it gives that other tools don't is it links not only the process flow, but the information flow and how it flows. It's got multi-dimensional information on it. And in my view, it probably is a tool used in process with the highest density of information in a single graphic, and that's why it is good. It does help you in identify and remove waste and other lean-type things. Plus, it can give you a strategy and lead you to improvements using a common language above that for practitioners may use. Where does it fit in our roadmap? Well, if you might notice here, we have our DMAIC for our roadmap, which you'd find in most Six Sigma stuff. But for us to put our system together, expanded the measure phase out into 5 sub-processes, because measure itself, the purpose of that step is to come up with as many potential causes to be evaluated. And I guess when I trained it with, I've had 2 other sets of material I've trained over my career. But people give a little too passing wave over some of these and don't spend the time on it. So we've got one about planning, one about baselining. We spend a lot of time to make sure you can do a control chart and a capability assessment. But the next one is put your lean hat on and assess the lean assessment tools, we call it, of your project. Because something, the lean aspect of projects may generate a list of potential causes that I want to evaluate. So I've got the stability causes. I've got the lean type causes. I'm starting my list of potential causes. We want to formally look at the measurement system that generates the data. Again, a list of potential causes. Then we call the wisdom of the organization, which is the stuff most people taught for measure, which is the TQM or the brainstorming, the cause and effect matrices, FMEAs, fault tree diagrams, and such as that. But again, they're all part of generating a list of potential causes. The value stream map can be part of the lean assessment. And what you have here is our lean assessment roadmap, the first tier down. And I know I'm not showing you all of them, but anytime we have a process map that's got the shadow behind it like the one circled, it means there's a drill down behind it with another tier of process settings. So we would, if we think there's lean issues and we have an assessment we give you, you would dive down and do flow analysis value stream maps as part of your preparation for your listing of causes. Here is the roadmap for doing a value stream map. I'm not going to spend a lot of time running through it. We'll actually walk through some of the steps when we do our exercise at the end. But you'll find it's a very traditional lean path where and I'm not going to talk about all pieces. This really is not about how to do a value stream map. I'm really going to try to emphasize how the SIPOC can be a starting point for doing it. A couple points you do think about a value stream map, and I guess this leads back to the question that was provided. I'm going to go back one slide. Value stream maps are not about your whole process. The belief of value stream maps is that it fits one of the phrases I like to use in teaching. It doesn't, if you're going to make a process improvement, it doesn't really matter where you start. It just is that you start. Now, in a value stream map, you're supposed to look at all your products, your families, and you look at all the processes that go on, and you pick a single family, they call it, that involves the majority of your business processes or manufacturing processes, but you only chart a single flow. In process mapping, you plot all the different options, but in a value stream map, you generally focus on one segment of your work and only plot that. The belief is improvements you make in one, you will leverage and apply to your whole organization. Now, even if there are not SOPs or standard operating procedures, which the question had, the first step in a value stream map, we'll walk through it, you position it, it's got a format, but you walk down and watch the process and collect data on it. I think in my lean training they called it you walk the line. You generally do not worry about the SOPs when you do your current state value stream map. What you're doing is you're charting the as-is process as it's being executed. The SOPs and such will come in some of the later things, but your first goal is to plot exactly what they're doing today, because that's your baseline process. In the process that you identify potential improvements. Now here's what one may look like. I know this isn't a great one, but it shows the concept. You always put these little factory-looking buildings at the corners, the customer and the supplier. Supplier's always in the upper left, customer's in the upper right. These ones in the middle are all your management or support staffs. It's where the purchasing, the sales, planning, and all the business processes go. You have process blocks in a straight line along the bottom. Value stream maps don't have a lot of branches. You hardly ever see decision steps. It's a single linear flow, and it's because of some of the other aspects we do that. You have icons for inventories. Every little picture has got a standard for it. And at the bottom, this jagged line, it's like a time value map, but it's an assessment of where the time's going to allow you to put more information in there. There are standard icons, and this lists only a few of them. You should really get them off the internet or almost any book. Now, our Volume 3 textbook covers all this, and it's got in detail standard methods for putting the leanish value stream map in. But there is a reference I think most people go to, which is called Learning to See by Rother and Shook, which is, it's a workbook that's got a really nice example of building them. And these are the standard icons. You can see arrows for how the material moves. There's different shape boxes, inventories. The truck one, I don't have all of them, but generally when things move, you have an icon, trucks, ships, boats. See, trucks, planes, boats. I'm missing one. Trains. Why do you have different ones? Because they take different times, and we're talking about the lead time from when I need it till I arrive. There we go. There's icons. Now, there's a lot of data that gets collected, and here's an example out of our training material I pulled out. There's cycle times and changeouts. Why I have this in there is we usually have shorthand for different things, cycle times and changeouts. Changeover time from product to product or piece to piece. Cycle time in lean is different from other things. Cycle time is the time to do a single part. Lead time is what we talk about, the overall time. But you can put anything you want in there that relates to your project. If you're talking about reducing time, you have a lot more time ones. If you're worried about cost, you put a lot of cost issues in there. But again, you put in these what you think you need to look at. Now the process block, a little expansion of it, generally it's got a title and it's got different types of material in the standard format in it. It can be anything. Again, it's what you as the team think you need. The inventories, I put this one in there because when I learned this the first time, you put inventories in counts. I've got this many generally on average in my inventory. But I find in the last couple of years, more and more people look at inventories by the hours of work in inventory rather than the counts. That allows you to deal with more flexibility into what kind of things are in inventory. So it can be counts or hours. And I personally now use hours of work. I've got a 2-hour inventory in the location, which I think sometimes helps me better. The bottom one, this little jagged line, there's an expansion of what it looks like. Generally, you put above the line or the total clock time or lead time that you have in your process. If you look at the map, there's a well below every process block. That well is to indicate that you had value-added time also going on. I'd read this one here in the middle as it was 1.5 hours in the area, but only 8 minutes of value-added time were performed. Right? In the end, you take the sum of all the lead time and the value-added time to come up with an efficiency. This one here would be 18 minutes over 34 hours. I think when I see most actual value stream maps out in industry, they're running in the 10 to 15% efficiency with time, unless they spend a lot of time improving, but 50% would be phenomenal. So don't get mad if you're down at the 5% range, because there's a lot of time that stuff's sitting around. That's just the way it is. All right? Now, there's typically 3 value stream maps written in the way I see it. I think if you pick up a book, it generally tells you 2. You do the current state and what people call the future state, which I'll call the ideal state. And we'll do a little bit of that in our exercise. The current state is what you saw happening today. The future state is what it could be if everything was optimized in the lean methodologies. But I believe there's a third one. When you're all done with your project, you will map what you think the new process is when you're done, so what improvements you make. So I generally do 3 of them. Now, do you need to do a value stream map? And the answer is, well, of course not. You should only use it when it's a benefit to you. It can take a lot of time. I wouldn't use it unless it's the right tool. So, of course, what's right? And you have my opinion here and our company's opinion. When you're really looking at an entire value stream for causes and improvements, it's probably the right tool. If you've narrowed down to a sub-process way down inside of your value stream, I probably wouldn't use it. There's other tools that are better. Generally, you do a value stream, which means you've got a clear customer, supplier, and a process. High-level business stuff, but also processing like of an invoice, that is a value stream. A customer provides it, you process it, and payments are made. And if your project somewhere in its problem statement says takes too long, or it says costs too much, but there's not really a quality issue, you're just trying to do it better, that's another lead to when a value stream map is good. Now, lean people may disagree, but I would say if quality is your bigger driver, the benefits of a value stream map are not as big, so I generally don't use it if it's just a quality type project. It can be beneficial, but again, it's leader dependent. Many of the Lean Six Sigma tools are dependent on what the leader likes to do and what you'll be willing to lead. I believe you can even do a leanish project without a value stream map, but there are things you would use in place of it. You do need something to tie all the process and its measurements together. Now, last piece of this, there's software to make value stream maps. I find that the best people don't use them. That's not fair because you might be using it. The long-term users, the ones that taught me and what I thought were best in class, only use the software when they're all done to make a presentation graphic, because they auto-calculate stuff. You don't want to use one in minutes, one in seconds, one in hours. Many of the software makes you have a constant time unit, such as that. It's really done with a big piece of plotter paper or butcher paper, if you think of that. A long roll gets posted on the wall, and you start with pencils and Post-it notes, and you keep it live while you're working. So it really is hand-drawn. I have sat through presentations to CEOs that had a hand-drawn thing staple on the wall. It went very well because I'll tell you, it's a very people-dependent process, and it's really okay to use it. I think it shows a lot of detail. So I still believe in doing them on paper. If you're going to put it on a computer, do it at the end. But I do know good people that can do it on a computer. It's just, I guess I'm an old-timer. Here's the next question on VSM usage. Where are you on that? From never heard of it to use it all the time. Please answer the question, and we'll keep moving on our topic here. Thank you for answering. It looks a lot of people use it sometimes. I think if I was to choose, using it sometimes is where I would be on there. All right. If you click a couple buttons, we'll wrap this one up here. All right. Mallory, if you close the poll, and we'll see what everybody got. All right, use it some. Half the people say you use it sometimes, and I think that's a good place. Now, if you use it every time, a couple people do. I would expect that your training came in probably initial lean areas, or you've been working on processes and projects that lend themselves to it, and that's fine. I've got some peers that use it almost every time, and they're very successful. So, like all tools, I believe this is the option of doing it. Luckily, zero said nobody heard of it, because I guess you wouldn't have signed on to the webinar if you didn't know what they are. So thank you for that. Next one, the point of the whole webinar. Now, I put this on here as I was creating this thing up. If I was a fancy software guy instead of just an applied Lean Six Sigma dude, I would have made a fancy flash graphic that the word SIPOC transformed into a value stream map. But I guess I'm just a statistician, so I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine some big moving thing, and wow, and you can say in your mind, that was pretty neat. Well, this is the best you get. There's my SIPOC graphic that went into value stream map. The suppliers go on the upper left, the customers upper right. You took your process from a vertical list, laid it on its side, and you have inputs and outputs in your process. But if you never thought about that, the SIPOC really is this framework to build your value stream map. I hope you get great comments on how exciting that graphic was. I got even Mallory snickering at that one. But I'm not a programmer. I'm a doer. So here we go. Let's walk past this. Now, I like the time value map, and that isn't the picture that you might do, or it's not part of this topic. But a value stream map is equivalent to what we're doing. This is the way I would do it in a non-value stream map project. I run the SIPOC, do a time value map. That might be enough. But that is, in so many icons, a value stream map. Now we're going to work an example. This is where the fun part is. I'm going to a software that's like a virtual whiteboard software, and we're going to play with this. Hope this looks okay on your screen. We're going to do a SIPOC. Now, this is about making an apple pie. Everybody visualize apple pie. And who are the suppliers? I actually went out and did this. So it's somewhat you're going to be part of my team that did this. We're going to go to suppliers. Now, what are my suppliers? In this case, it was the grocery store. I went to the grocery store to buy all the things I needed. All right? Only input. What are my inputs now since I found my supplier? Well, guess what you need? Apples. If you don't realize, you want sour apples, not sweet ones. Some apples are soft when you bake them. Some are crispy. I guess I'm a chemist in my first degree. I look at cooking as the only thing I left doing the degree I got in college. But Granny Smith apples were chosen. They're a good choice. Some apples that are very good to eat, such as Fuji apples, they mush when you cook them, so it's not a very good one. So generally sour ones. And I said state a generalism. So we have spices and sugar. There are some inputs. And what's the other one? Flour, shortening, which you should realize is the crust. All right, flour, shortening, and water and salt are all that go into the crust. All right, what's my process? There's a great one. What's the process? Well, guess what the first step is? Peel the apples. Next one is slice apples. You have to put them in little slices. Then I season the apples. By the way, that's sugar, clove, cinnamon, a touch of salt, and lemon, a little lemon juice, lemon peel. So seasoned apples. What's next? Well, make the crust. Again, that's a separate piece. Then we build the pie. Trying to keep the 5 to 7 steps, and guess the last one is? Bake and cool, because then I can eat it. There's my process. Now, if you're running a project and you're going through, it really shouldn't be much longer. The process should stay high level. Now, is there more to making a pie than what I wrote down? Well, of course there is. But I'm trying to keep this at a high level. So to my team, I'd say if we're going to improve pie making, we're going to improve our inputs, and we're going to try to get them better, or we're going to work on these steps. And we will talk about a value stream map and how we can improve it. Now, what are the outputs out of this process? Well, it is a pie. It's the only output. I'm not putting dirty dishes because that's there. And who are the customers of this process? Now, what you don't understand is I'm teaching a black belt class this week. So the customers are my black belt students because they are going to eat this pie. And it really is sitting right next to me. didn't get the webcam working, but I have a apple pie sitting right here, 9-inch deep dish. Very good, but we are going to, after this webinar, go break open the pie and eat it. So it should be good. So there's my SIPOC. Everybody can understand that. What's next would be the value stream map, right? Well, I'm going to take this SIPOC, and how do I turn that into a value stream map? Well, it doesn't show all up on the screen well, but here we go. My software is a little bit larger. There we go. My supplier. So that I'd put my grocery store. Who's my customer? My students. What are my inputs and outputs? Well, since I don't do graphics, I couldn't make this pop up. If I move my white box off of this, there's my inputs. Cinnamon and clove, Crisco. Note, apples more than one. I got my sugar, I got my flour, and salt. That's really about all that goes into it, except water. Now, those are my inputs. I should put a car in here. I don't have a car icon, but I drove to the store to get these and brought them home. All right? Now, there's my process steps. Peel apples, slice apples, season apples. Now, make crust is up in the air. Now, one thing we don't do in value stream maps is have branches that are over top of each other. But I ran this process with my timing last night. And I peeled the apples. Now, this icon is for people. And I also know, I'll see it. I had one person do that. Come on, put a 1 in there. I want it to show up. It's probably there, and I have to make it bigger. Why won't I get a 1 in there? 1. Well, we're going to do it again then. One person. I had one person here. I had one person season apples, by the way. I was by myself making this. One person making the crust. One person building the pie. But guess what? For baking, there was nobody there. For cooling, there was nobody there. So there's my staffing, first thing you do. Now I go through my data. Well, I collected data on the change-out. Now, what's change-out in baking a pie? Well, I had to go get these stuff, which was a peeler, get the cutting board, get it all set up. So that was how it took to do. And then with every apple, I peel an apple, I had to move it out of the way and peel the next apple. Now, these are just because I didn't peel and slice each apple. I peeled them all in a batch, sliced them all in the batch. So it took about 0.2 minutes to get all my material out. Now, cycle time in the lean factor is a time per piece. Time per apple, about 0.7 minutes. Now, if I look at this whole step, I timed it. I was about 4 minutes totally peeling apples. But when I went back and looked, value-added time, only about 3 minutes of it was value-added. The other was getting my stuff up, moving the apples around, picking up the next apple. Now, if you were good with your math, you can guess how many apples I used. It's about 5. So 5 times 7/10 of a minute comes up to a little around 3 minutes. But I had 5 apples. I did cheat a little bit. I realized that peeling apples takes long, and I could get the 5-pound bag with these little teeny apples or go buy big ones. And I realized peeling's a constraint, so I got big apples, so I only had to peel 5. By the way, the recipe requires 2 pounds of apples. That's what it said. All right, slicing them. I timed myself. It took me about 12 minutes to slice all the apples and get them in nice, even slices. The value-added time, 8 minutes. There was a lot of cleaning the pieces, and I was involved coring them. Next part, seasoning them. Took about 3 minutes. You dump all the mixture together, the sugar and the spices. You dump it on and stir it till they're thoroughly coated. About 2 minutes. Oh, and I missed this. Change-out time. To go from peeling to slicing, about 30 seconds to switch out to the next task. Time per apple, about 1.5 minutes, because you got to be careful. You don't want to cut yourself. You also want to get all apple slices about the same size so they cook even. Now, seasoning took about a minute to change out. In other words, to get done with slicing, to pull out a pan, mix all the pieces together. So about a minute change out of my 3 minutes and 2 minutes of value-added time. Now to the crust. Now, I actually made crust last night, which if you haven't done it, it is tedious. Flour shortening and salt and water, I used that type of recipe. The change-out time, it took about 2 minutes to go from seasoning the apples, clearing my workspace to get all the stuff out to make crust. So I had to change out about 2 minutes. The time to make the crust from start to finish was right around 31 minutes. That is a long time. The value-added time ended up being about 20. That was the stirring, the mixing, rolling, kneading, and all that. But you have to let it chill a little bit. It's got to do with the starches all mixing together. You get about 20 minutes of value-added time. Once I'm all done with that, then I build my pie. Now, in this case, there was scrap apples. The recipe said 2 pounds. I put 5 apples, seemed to be a little over 2 pounds. But I ended up with about 10% of my apples scrapped that I couldn't put in my pie. Now, there's other things they could use before, but in this respect, they were scrapped. They did not go in. So I'm seasoning my apples, about 6 minutes total. I assumed about 5 minutes of value-added time in there. I baked them, baking, 45 minutes. I figured it's about 2 minutes of value-added time that I did, and I was looking at my value-added time. You could call the entire bake value-added, but I focused on the person's value. I did about 2 minutes of total work with baking, which is getting the racks right, putting it in, and getting it back out again. Cooling took about 30 minutes to cool. I figured there was about a minute of value-added time. In other words, that was just clearing out a place to put it. Now, the next step in a value stream map is summing up all the lead times and all the value-added time. This comes up to about 131 minutes it took me, or about 2 hours start to finish. And that's about what it took. How many minutes of value-added time? 31 minutes. All right. Now, if I added the bake time in, it would have come up a lot more, closer to 70 or about 50%. This is right around 22% efficient. So in other words, for me, 22% of my time of those 2 hours were spent working. The other ones were waiting. Now, if I'd have put in the bake, it would have been about 50%. So there we go. Now, I didn't do, I got my change-out time for bake. I forgot. Let me look up my data sheet. About 1 minute for the change-out, and for cooling, that took me about a minute to clear a space to put it. Now, what's my output? Did my fancy graphics? There is my pie. That is the actual pie made last night sitting on my stove. All right, so there was the pie that came out, and I have that is the output that's going to my students. So I've basically created a value stream map right now, starting with a SIPOC, observing the process, putting in data. All right. That is really the relationship. So this whole webinar was really about that step, showing how it really is the kickoff for it, and people have said that the SIPOC is a simple value stream map. What's missing, though? Movement. Well, did I push or pull the last piece of it? Because if you don't talk about the way things move, you're missing some of the things. This dashed or the striped line, like where's Waldo, that's a push statement. So I actually peeled all the apples and pushed them to the slicing station. When I sliced them, I pushed them to the seasoning station, just a bowl. I immediately then went to get the crust. Now this is going to talk about why did I move this up. The crust really was another piece of the process. When I finished the crust, I pushed it to the building pie. But I really, these seasoned apples just sat there in their output queue. And that's why I have the pull arrow here. That's a pull arrow. I didn't, as soon as I had the crust, I pulled the apples into the build pie station. So I did have a change in flow there. But notice how they're staggered, because I cannot put them over top of each other because this time span thing doesn't work. This is about the only variability you get in the value stream map to show multiple flows. All right? And I go for the rest of them. They were all pushes from here on. I pushed it to bake, and when it was bake, I pushed it to cool. All right? So that's the flow of my process. Some people may use the push and pull on their arrows for inputs and outputs. I generally don't. All right, we've got a question coming in. Explain why baking is not a value added. It transitions the raw products into a pie. And it would seem that there is customer added value. And you're right. I sat there and go, value added, non-value added. And I thought, you probably in a traditional sense, I should have put this to be all 45 minutes. And if I do, this number comes up to 70-something. Boy, I don't know. Again, this is one of those leader-dependent things. You could say it transitions it, but I generally, when I throw stuff in a piece of equipment and walk away, yeah, you know something? Whoever asked the question, I'm going to give you smarter than the instructor's score. It really should have been a value-added step. When I sit there and run through my mind, what is the rules? The old days, changes fit, form, or function of the product. In other words, if the customer pays you for it, it would be a value-added step. So I think it probably should be. Now, can you buy unbaked pies? Yeah, well, if my customer just wanted a pie and wanted to bake it himself, that would be a non-value-added step. So I'm going to go with that should be a value-added step, and this is now 70-some minutes. So it's 50% efficient. Ooh, another question coming in. The more you bake, the more value. How about a microwave? Okay. I'm going to make fun of whoever asked that question, but it's an independent. But you don't microwave a pie. Now, if it's been cooked once, because microwaves do not brown, they just heat. But it is a good question about, are there quicker ways to bake? Now, that's a great question, but we wouldn't address it in the as-is process. The next step, I'm going to wrap up this webinar, and I'm running close to an hour. It looks like I probably will push you right to an hour. Ask questions, please. The next step is the future state value stream map. Now, what would that be? Now, this is the basic. You start with the basic part. What could I do better? And I sat down as my cake or my pie was baking last night and said, how could I do better? What is the optimal case in a lean view or of any process improvement? Would be the least number of steps. Each step takes the least amount of time, and I spend the least amount of effort. Oh, how can working on scrapping material be a value-added step? I'm not sure what that one means. Oh, that's on my apple scrap, as it's pointed to me. The point is, this was a value-added step of building the pie. I put a note in here that I had a 10% scrap rate. That isn't piece of, in other words, no scrap anywhere else. But if that is still, in other words, by the fact of scrapping 10% of my apple, that means I overproduced in these steps. So I'm putting, the point is, only 90% of my prepared apple went into this pie. Because I only made one pie, it was scrapped. So it's not, the value-added step was building the pie. Coming out of it was, I had scrap material. That's really what I intended. It's not building scrap. That is a piece of this. I didn't talk about change out or anything, because once I had the crust, once I had the apples, I basically threw it together right there. So no, this is just an indication of what happened in that step. There was no other scrap in the process. I guess I could say in bake there was some overflow that hit the pan, but I'm not counting that. Future state, let's finish this all up. The next step of the value stream map is what could I do better? Well, what could I do? Well, I did peel and slice. 2 different steps. If I look back at my data, that was a total of 20 minutes, basically, of time. If you didn't know it, they make things called peeler slice, let's see, apple, peeling, slicing, coring, and all this. This little machine you clamp on your table, you put your apple in, and you crank it. It peels and slices and cores the apple all in one step. I do have one. You can do an apple in about 10 seconds. So if I would change from doing it manually, so let's get rid of this. Say I don't want that. I'm going to do the, we'll call it the peel, slice, and core apples in one time. My cycle time becomes about, I'll call it 0.25 minutes per apple. My change out, there is some time, probably about a minute to set it up and take it down. But I have just dramatically reduced the time to do. Instead of 20 minutes, I'm going to get done in 2. And I'll tell you, it really is a great thing. Now, seasoning apples, there's not much in an optimal sense I could buy the seasoning. I'm not going to, though. How about making crust? If I look back, what could I do to shorten this? I said it was 30 minutes or so total to make a crust. If you don't realize it, making crust is a pain in the back. I'm not using a bad word there. But you can go and now they make a Pillsbury pre-made dough. If you make pies now, it works wonderful. Used to be boxed, you had to unfold it. It was horrible. But they've improved it. Now it's in rolls. I could have bought the crust. If I had bought the crust, this whole step goes away, which is what I would do in real life. I would go buy, if it wasn't for this, I would have bought it. That whole step goes away. So I've eliminated a wasteful step that I can actually purchase as an input. Build pie doesn't change. I still got to drop it down there and make it. No way around that one right now, or is there? Well, I still got to bake it, and I still got to cool it. So this could be my future state right now, but there is one more you could do. What could I do instead of these two? I could buy a can of apple filling, just buy the crust, dump them in, and bake it. That's another future state I could use. Put in those times. Now, there is even, as one of my students I was talking today about this, he goes, why the heck are you even making it? Your process should be go to the grocery store and get to know Mrs. Smith. She makes Mrs. Smith's pie. And they laughed. Instead of going to Granny Smith for an apple, go to Mrs. Smith and just buy the pie. Now, if I'd chosen that, all I have is bake and cool now. If I'd bought the pie, my cycle time's down to basically 55 minutes and I get the pie. Now, by doing it this way, I get down to the total cycle time of this, I say, would be about 5 minutes total. Season the apples, just, I forget what I put last time. It was 2 minutes or 3 minutes total. There's no preparation. Building it takes just about, go back to my numbers, about 6 minutes to build it, 45 minutes to cook it, 30 minutes to cool. And I'm now down to, from really a little over 2 hours, I'm down to 1 hour and 20 minutes now to make my pie. Now, if I'd have gotten rid of and just bought a can, I drop 8 more minutes, I'm out just over 1 hour, 15 minutes now. But you see how we can walk through this. The future state, that's what would be ideal, and then you trade them off. Being an apple pie maker, I would never buy a can of apple pie mix. So this is probably as far as I go, and I do use the regular crust. It works better, and I would bake it. Now, one of you said, why is baking a value, not a value added? But what if I chose to provide a unbaked pie to my customer? That would work. Now, here's a question that came in. Is it wasteful to pre-make the apple pie seasoning in batches? That was a great question. Now, in the ideal sense, everything should be just in time. Now, if I think of, if I was an apple pie maker and I had more than one to make, I would probably pay somebody to make up the sugar and seasoning mix for me, so I don't have to. One of our customers makes baking products, and they buy the raw fruit, and they buy a pre-mixed seasoning batch so that the machine can just dump it in by weight. Now, if there is value in batching up material for a constraint, now what is the constraint? We didn't talk about that. Where is the constraint? Well, baking's a constraint, and cooling, I guess. Now, I could bake faster. By the way, convection ovens would have done this in about 25 minutes, about half the time. I don't have one. You could do cooling with a fan to get that done, so I could speed it up that way. What's the next question? So I think you would always batch up, again, if you're doing like your constraint in this case probably was putting the pie together. Anytime I can pre-prep things, if I could have do this in mass production, I would probably pre-buy the apples, unless it was too expensive, and buy the seasoning all pre-mixed and just use it, because it would take it out of the constraint. Next question. By reducing time, are we giving up qualities and taste? Isn't that the real question? You want to optimize your process without giving up quality. This is right here on the diagram on the screen is where I would optimize it. I do think you need real apples. I do think you should season them with real spices. I do think you should build a pie. But I have decided, in my view, pre-made crust now is nearly as good as homemade. And when I really look at it in a statistician sense, I can make crust better than I can buy. But every time I make it, it varies a lot. My best crusts, light, flaky, are better than the store-bought. But I'm having a tough time. The ingredients are working. About the worst case I get making it by hand is about equal to I can buy at the store, and they're all acceptable. I would buy it. I also don't have to stock as many raw materials. But again, that's why giving up on the quality, I would never buy pre-canned filling. I'd make it from scratch. It really does make a better cake. I think that's about it right now. I hope I'm going to wrap it up here. Let me go back to my wrap-up. Hopefully I got a little history of the SIPOC. You've got a little understanding of value stream map. You've seen the relationship between the two. And I've worked through a sort of, I hope the example, I will call it fun. It was fun for me. Again, keep asking questions. You got a couple. I got a little extra time. If you've had a tool or a time you'd like to share where the value stream map is really key to you, feel free to share it. But that's where we are right now. Now, I thank you for visiting our webinar. If you choose to purchase a set of our new series of books, and I didn't talk much about them, series of 4 books on, we call them Integrated Enterprise Excellence, but it really is renaming of the whole business improvement system. The Volume 3 book was on projects. That's what you'd typically see on Lean Six Sigma. The prior books are more about the enterprise. Our belief now is Lean Six Sigma is not really just a project improvement tool anymore. It becomes an enabling tool for business improvement. A lot of our system is really trying to connect the business needs to the project list so you get more targeted projects. Our view for consulting, we'd rather you train less people and run less projects so that every person's well trained and every project helps the bottom line. So that's really what we're seeing. But if you want to buy the books, there's a code here you can get on our website, log on, and get a discount for the books. Is there another question coming in, Mallory? It says, what's a good book to purchase on Value Stream Map that includes a list of icons? Well, I mean, I can't help but say you should buy our Volume 3 book because they're in there. But again, that's got a lot more other material in it. I think the book stands, I've got my fingers in front of me, probably about 3 inches thick. But it's got everything you need to know about projects, which includes teaming aspects, creativity, Lean, Six Sigma, statistics, and all that. If you're looking for a value stream specific book, I would look for a book called Learning to See, which the C is S-E-E. I believe the authors are Rother and Shook. It's a quite expensive book. It's $50. It's 8.5 by 11, but it's a workbook style, and it looks like it's hand-drawn. It's really an easy book to go through, but it lists all the standard icons, and it works you through the example of one, and then the second half of the book is they give you a case study, and you sort of build it based on their case study. I actually have it on my shelf. I use it if I'm doing specific training or OJT coaching with a student, because if they're having trouble with value stream maps, I'd like some of the graphics. That's the only one I'd give you for that. Next one. So far, most value stream examples came across in manufacturing. Can you use them on service? Of course you can. But in a service example, you still have to have a value stream. I've seen it successfully used on processing transactions such as we've sold something, the generation of the invoice to a customer. Well, you'd start off there. You have to have a product at some level. In this case, it's a piece of paper. You would do, what are the steps we go through? How much time do they take? What are they doing? Do I have scraps? Do I have errors and all that? But yes, you can do it. The hard part about it is, and a lot of times in the service or that we'll call it the transactional processes, it's very difficult to define the product, and they don't look at it as a process. Unless you can draw your process out in a process map, a value stream map won't work because you have trouble with that discrete process step. But yeah, of course you can. Now, does it make more sense in manufacturing? I think most examples are there, but no. It's wonderful in the service industry. In my view, the lean tools do more benefits outside of manufacturing than they do in it because we spent years improving manufacturing. Most people haven't worked on the admin processes. Here it says, we use the VSM process to enhance how we take care of diabetic patients. It speaks volumes when it's done right, and I truly agree. That was a non-manufacturing thing. What steps do you go through in dealing with patients? How long does it take? How much labor do I put into it? What drives customer satisfaction? That's neat because I like that example because that's really a continuous process. All right? They're constantly going back, and every event you touch your customer, so it's one value event every time you treat the customer. But the only time value stream maps to me have not been real beneficial is when they're in a direct continuous process. And I've seen some. The raw materials go on a conveyor and into bins, and it runs, and comes out a final product. In those cases, they don't do as much good because everything's timed, everything's sort of pulled through. In the food world, if I was making these pies at a factory, you'd be dumping apples in one end and sugar and seasoning, and it builds the pie automatically, and it actually runs it through a freezer, gets frozen, and puts it in a box, and nobody touches it. In that case, a value strand map wouldn't be much benefit. I think that's all the questions I have right now. I appreciate it. We're going to wrap this up. Appreciate your feedback. At the end of the webinar, you will get, when you log off, there'll be a survey that pops up. I appreciate you filling it out, giving us feedback. We generally will call all of you and see if you have any more questions afterwards. If you really do not want to get a call back, that is one of the questions you can check on there, and we will not reach out to you. I really thank you for the time. I hope it was worth both your time and the nominal fee you paid to get here. If you have questions for me specifically, feel free to, on the call, ask about it, or you can contact me at the company. I think it's rick.h@smartersolutions.com. You should get an email in a couple days from us either way that allows you to watch this again if you want. Now, is there anything else I need to cover? Again, I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you are more rapid at getting to your improvement next time you try it. Thank you very much.